You're conditioned from such a young age to believe by default that the relationship and the achievement of the relationship is what makes you happy. You're not given the space or the permission to even ask yourself, and who am I and what do I want, whether I'm in a relationship or not? Hello, angels, baddies, and bitches. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Amber Akilla. I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for following me on all the things at Amber Akilla. Subscribe to my podcast, Friend Crush with Amber Akilla. There's a lot of like audio only content on there. If you're going through a breakup, if you have a friend breakup, dealing with jealousy, haters, pre-30 crisis, quarter life crisis, surviving no contact, hookup culture, ghosting, orbiting, lots of content around those topics on my podcast. If you want to be part of our group chat and for exclusive subscriber only episodes, I'm on Patreon as well. And yeah, today's video is going to be probably a little bit all over the place, but just sort of like my reaction response to a recent article that was published in British Vogue called "Is Having a Boyfriend Embarrassing Now?" Written by Shantae Joseph. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Written on the 25th, or published on the 25th of October, 2025. And at the time of recording, it's the 29th. So it's been like 4 days since it came out. And multiple people have sent me videos about this article and asked me what my thoughts are. So I just thought I'd make like a quick off the cuff video. This is going to be my day 10 no hating challenge video instead of a vlog. Okay, so for context to anyone that's clicking on this video and seeing me for the first time, I have been posting on TikTok since 2021. I started my podcast in 2020, and ultimately my question and thesis is, how can I and you live your best life as authentically as possible, okay? Being hot and having fun. Define this according to your personality, your needs, your goals, and the vibe that you want for your life. And you can also come up with your own sort of like philosophy or tagline that you use as sort of like an anchor to sort of like prompt you in different moments. Is this serving my best interests? Yes or no? Is this helping me be my best self so that I can show up better? Yes or no? You know, this is how I find it helpful to like navigate my life at this stage, right? And the way that I have sort of discussed this has evolved over time. And at first, I used to talk a lot about dating dynamics because I realized that, you know, I have all these questions around self-actualization and self-empowerment, and ultimately, what is the best way to communicate these ideas, right? And to talk about it in a political sense, I find, is not that productive because you really limit your audience, because not everybody has the time and the privilege to think about things through a political lens. Most people just want things to be quick, easy, and to the point. And when you get into like political rhetoric, it can be really alienating to a lot of people who could benefit from the message of how can I make better decisions in my day-to-day life and in my relationship with myself and others to live my best life and be happy, okay, in spite of the noise. So I realized that dating is actually one of the best. In the past, I've had more like politically driven projects and more like gender specific LGBTQ focused projects, but I sort of like pivoted into using gender dynamics and dating dynamics as a way to sort of Trojan horse the concept of choose yourself and your happiness, okay? Two people that love each other choose their own love and happiness, and then together they collaborate on creating a third reality. That's how I sort of like visualize what love really is in terms of an action. The willingness to extend yourself for the purpose of your own or someone else's spiritual growth. Being able to hold you and someone else's best interest as equally important, okay? And this is not just like a black and white thing. It's a constant sort of adjustment, negotiation, and compromise that you either choose to do or not to do for someone, together or not, basically. Easy to describe, difficult to embody, right? I think a lot of discussion around dating is considered superficial and kind of cringe, but I think at the same time, people's relationships in the micro ultimately woven together create society as a whole, right? So patriarchy is not just something that is imposed upon you, it's a set of values that you internalize and then you live out, and you end up with the way that the genders interact with, relate or don't relate to each other in wider society. Okay, so if I can describe to a woman a dynamic that she's familiar with a fuckboy, and in that situation remind her that her happiness is just as important as being able to satisfy or not satisfy the illusion of what she thinks this guy needs or wants from her. Choosing yourself is a radical feminist act in that situation, okay? Because you're signaling to yourself as a woman that you have agency over your experience, and your happiness and your self-esteem is your responsibility. And you're signaling to that man that you are not someone that he can exploit, you know, and that may or may not change how he approaches his relationships with other women. That's going to be his problem. So that's sort of like how I see the way that dating dynamics fit into my content and my message, my thesis, my conceptual exploration. How can we find a way to like navigate life and live in a way that's like authentic for us, and also allows us to show up as the best version of ourselves for others as well. You know, it's not just about bettering yourself in a selfish way, but bettering yourself so that you can contribute better as well to the world around you and to your relationships. I highly recommend you read the article. It's a pretty quick read and I really enjoyed it. One of the main quotes from the article is, "Being partnered doesn't affirm your womanhood anymore. It is no longer considered an achievement. And if anything, it's become more of a flex to pronounce yourself single. As straight women, we're confronting something that every other sexuality has had to contend with, a politicization of our identity. Heterosexuality has long been purposefully indefinable, so it is harder for those within it and outside of it to critique. However, as our traditional roles begin to crumble, maybe we're being forced to reevaluate our blind allegiance to heterosexuality." Okay, and this is related to a book that I just happen to be reading at the moment. It's called The Tragedy of Heterosexuality by Jane Ward, and it's really, really interesting read. I'm only like 40% of the way through, but I think this is going to be one of those books that becomes like books that I recommend flat out, because if you follow me on anything else, especially if you ever join one of my TikTok lives and people ask me for book recommendations, the two books I always recommend, The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden, The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, and I think this book, The Tragedy of Heterosexuality, is going to be the third that I recommend to people that are sort of like exploring themselves through their approach to romantic relationships, because there's a lot that you can learn about yourself in that context, you know, whether you're actively dating or not. The desire to love and be loved is so core to the human experience, and I think that we by default tie this to romantic relationships, but it can extend to anything. You know, I think the dynamics that I describe in a lot of my content is not romance specific. It also pertains to platonic relationships with your parents, with co-workers. You know, at the end of the day, the dynamic is almost the same. You know, the tension and the emotional tension between two parties, and then the context that exists in is going to vary from person to person. So you might be dealing with like unrequited love in a romantic situation, but it might also be in a friendship as well, you know, like when you feel an imbalance or an asymmetry between your interest in being invested in a friendship. And the same thing can happen like with family members and your parents too. If I am living my best life and I'm doing everything that I can to materialize that, I'm going to respect other people's desire to do that too. You know, I want you to do that for yourself so that when we come together, we're creating a third reality that's like even better than when we're alone. And I mean that in any context, okay? Work, family, friendship, and romance. And that's sort of like what we're all here to do, but there's so many external barriers that get in the way of that. So my content is like, okay, how can I better understand how I see these things, or what kind of framework can I apply that's going to allow me to get to the core of who I really am and to like live according to that, and not some external idea of what I should be doing to like enrich some arbitrary standard of what it means to be human or what it means to have value. Because you have value just by virtue of your existence. And I think that your life's journey is how do you express that and how do you do it in a way that creates like a positive contribution? How can we elevate the vibe, you know, rather than spiral into being ugly and having a bad time? Okay, let's be hot and have fun together. I want everyone to have fun and be rich, you know, and being rich is not just about material. It's like having a rich experience of life, because that's what I want for me. Selfishly, you know, so me. So is having a boyfriend embarrassing? Does that facilitate being hot and having fun or not? You know, I don't think that it's a yes or no answer. I think it's about what is behind asking this question. So I think this article is really important because it speaks to this changing sentiment around heterosexuality and dating, and also the performance of heterosexuality and how we do or don't integrate our relationship status into our public persona or public identity. And I think this also has a lot to do with social media and celebrity culture, which I'll sort of mention in a second. But I think that building on top of what's already being discussed in the article, rather than like, is having a boyfriend embarrassing? I would say, is living my best life compatible with being in a romantic relationship right now? Because I think the thing about heterosexual culture and dating culture is this idea that once I have a romantic relationship, once I'm chosen, or once I've been picked, or once I pick someone, and I can declare to the world that I'm not on the market anymore, I'm no longer single, then I'm going to be happy, and then all of my problems will go away. But in reality, like, the more people you add to a situation, the more potential for problems there are, okay? So you better choose wisely, and that's what I would emphasize. It's not about whether it's good or bad to be in a relationship. It's like, is it what is best for you and this other person in this moment, according to whatever either of you are trying to achieve individually or together? And I think that's the part that people don't ask, because you're conditioned from such a young age to believe by default that the relationship and the achievement of the relationship is what makes you happy. You're not given the space or the permission to even ask yourself, and who am I and what do I want, whether I'm in a relationship or not? And I think that is the question that I want to ask people and myself the most, you know? And everyone's journey is different. So there is no one size fits all dating advice, one size fits all relationship dynamic, or when to have a boyfriend, when not to have a boyfriend, when to be married, when not to be married, right? But I think ultimately it's like, how can you live your best life according to the information that you currently have? And then when things change, you adjust accordingly, okay? Because this is when it becomes embarrassing to have a boyfriend, when you've been given the information that suggests maybe this person is not right for you and you double down on it anyway. Like, that's the embarrassing part. Whether that's something that's embarrassing to you personally when you come to that realization, or other people sort of judge you for, you know what I mean? I don't want this to initiate a shame spiral, because I recently had this discussion on TikTok too, where I was talking about, you know, sometimes it's not a man's fault that you've been clowned. It's because you, on some subconscious level, pedestaled a man's approval of you as more important than your approval of yourself. And that's by design, okay? So I'm not here to judge you or shame you for it, but I think telling you to microdose a little bit of shame when you realize that that's what's happened, because nobody is going to be able to take responsibility for that but you. Once you've been given the information to realize that, you are the one that needs to do something with it, because if you choose not to, it's still going to be you that's held accountable at the end of the day, because that man is long gone. He don't care, okay? And he didn't care ever. And it's okay that you wanted to believe that he would, but once it's clear to you that he doesn't and you double down, that's when it becomes embarrassing, okay? And that's when you get into situations where you give beyond your like healthy boundary, or you give in a way to satisfy someone else to your own detriment, and then you feel slighted or entitled to having that like returned to you or reciprocated in some way when there was literally no indication that they ever planned on doing that for you. You know what I mean? And that's what becomes embarrassing. But obviously, if you're in a healthy, loving relationship, there's nothing to be embarrassed about, even if that doesn't work out most of the time, because you gave according to what was reasonable for you and they reciprocated. And then usually it's like circumstances, or, you know, something just runs its course and you part ways. You know, you don't have this feeling of embarrassment because you did everything you could with the information that you had, and you adjusted your expectations and the degree to which you invested in something accordingly. You know, it's when you aren't doing that, that's when things become embarrassing. So I would ask the question of like, okay, is this relationship compatible with me being hot and having fun? And you have to be very, very clear with yourself on what those things are. Only you can determine what your priorities are at any given stage in your life. And because there is so much noise around us and we're constantly being distracted all the time, you feel like, well, should I be doing this instead? Should I be doing that instead? Or is it wrong for me to do this? And it can be really, really difficult to tune into that inner voice, but that inner voice is there, okay? Like, it's there deep, deep, deep inside of you. And if you have regular practices like hot girl habits, meditation, journaling, going on a mental illness or a hot girl or a hot boy or a hot they walk, connecting with your body, doing physical activity, etc. To me, this is like training the mental muscle, opening that door to your subconscious to get to your inner voice. You know, it's like you're trying to grow out like your arm from your conscious self to your subconscious self and create a channel into that inner voice, okay? And that's an ongoing journey. There's no point at which you can stop having practices in place where you can just naturally do that. I think it has to be an intentional practice. And whatever practices help you to do that, keep doing it and keep adjusting as you go. And it's been really interesting for me in the last few years because I think that's when I've become more in tune with that inner voice. I noticed the difference between when I was in my like 20s and I had these different sorts of questions that were obviously coming from my inner voice, but I questioned because the noise was so much louder. You know, I hadn't tuned into this inner voice enough. So I made decisions where I had my inner voice tell me something and I acted against it because I thought, well, everybody else like wants a boyfriend right now. So like maybe I should just say yes to this guy that's giving me attention, or everybody else cares about this right now. So maybe I should do that even though I don't really care. Sorry, there's construction. I always say like sometimes you just haven't been alive long enough and it's just about practicing. You haven't been going to the gym long enough to expect to have biceps yet, okay? You have to keep going. And that's what connecting to your inner voice and like making mistakes and learning from them is all about. The more information you have, the more gym sessions you have, the more evidence you have of whether you're growing the muscle or not. The stronger your ability to discern between what's your inner voice and what's external noise, and how can you act on the inner voice or balance expectations between what you want and also what the world wants from you. Especially now that women have the right to education and to earning their own money and living life independently. Like, this is the first generation in a lot of places where women can buy their own property. You know, like that is being granted on a societal level to people. And it's still a very niche concept, okay? There are still women in the world that are being subject to genital mutilation and they're being sold and trafficked. So don't assume that equality is something that we've achieved globally, okay? Not even by a long shot. But I think if you are someone that has been given the privilege to get an education, to earn your own money, to live independently of a romantic relationship or of a partnership with a man who has to provide for you, this is not a privilege that you should take lightly, in my opinion, okay? Women were burnt at the stake for less, and you are crying and throwing up over a man. That's what's embarrassing. You are crying and throwing up over a man that you actually have the freedom to leave in ways that women just 1 or 2 generations before you didn't. That's what we're now realizing is kind of embarrassing. A lot of the times it's like, you have a job, you have a degree, you have a job, you have friends, you have a support system, and your man has none of those things. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have an education. He's not even like demonstrating basic levels of hygiene. That's what's embarrassing. This is for all the women that don't have the option of being able to leave a situation that endangers them financially, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It would be a disservice to them for you to stay in a situation that you have the freedom to leave, for you to choose better for yourself. A lot of women still don't have that. And I think that for a lot of us who have the privilege and the freedom to not put ourselves in embarrassing situations with men, it's thought of so flippantly, like it's so easy to take that for granted. And I urge you not to. If not for yourself, for like the community of women that you exist as a part of, like whether you like it or not. You know what I mean? Like, because there are women that are making sacrifices now before us that we reap the benefits of. And I think it's only right in a hot and having fun life to extend that to women that you are or are not directly connected to, and future generations of women. Point blank, period. Like, sorry. If I can't make a better decision for myself as a woman, then I'm going to do my best to make a better decision for a woman who's going to look at me and wonder, like, am I a girl's girl or am I a pick-me? Okay? Because as this book, The Tragedy of Heterosexuality by Jane Ward, discusses, heterosexuality is closely tied to patriarchy. The culture of heterosexuality is an arm of the patriarchy, and romantic partnership, like authentic romantic partnership between two people, is one thing, but this idea that men are the prize or women are the prize, or like you are each other's property as a result of your romantic relationship, and if you're single, you're sad and alone and a spinster and you don't have inherent value as a person unless you're partnered up, that is part of heterosexual culture. Okay, so part of being able to make radical decisions that are not only radical for yourself, but also in this sort of like broader political, social sense, is discovering who you are outside of this binary between men and women, and like man and woman must come together and your value is determined by like heterosexuality. Because sexuality is ultimately a spectrum, and there is not like a one size fits all relationship dynamic or situation that's going to work for everyone. The happiest couples that you know are the people that are living according to their truth individually and then creating this truth for themselves together. You know, they're not relying on the relationship to bolster their individual status or identity. They have a strong identity and then they have an identity as a couple as well. It's not like all enmeshed in one. It's not me or you, it's me and you. And this is something that is not just in romantic relationships, but also in relationships between family, friendships, work relationships, and society generally. Am I willing to extend myself for the betterment of the community or not? And is the community doing the same for me? And it's not like a black and white thing. It's like a spectrum, and it's a negotiation, and you have to have healthy boundaries, and it's like obviously very complex. But when you understand it in this way, you can push yourself to live as authentically as you can so that you can encourage other people to do that too. And in that way, you're not trying to control or manipulate other people into doing things to make yourself feel better, because you're taking full responsibility for your own happiness and allowing other people to do the same. Okay. And sometimes that can feel cruel because you have to remove yourself from relationships and situations that demand something from you that is ultimately someone else's responsibility. And that's something that I encourage people to do. You know, I talk about being intentionally single. A lot of people are like way too young to be thinking about who their life partner is going to be. And most people that are old enough to have experienced what it's like to have a life partner will tell you that it's not all sunshine and roses, and they're probably on like their second marriage, third marriage, or decided they don't want to date or marry ever again. You know, this fantasy that you're indoctrinated with as a child of like one person forever is not something that many people actually live in reality. You know, like life and relationships is actually really complicated and messy, and the idea that you can somehow circumvent the experience of pain in relationships of any context is like so naive. And the sooner that you embrace it, the sooner you'll be able to learn from it and grow as a person. You know, different people have different paths in life. So it's not like everyone should date or everyone shouldn't date. It's like, do I need to be dating right now in this stage of my life? The heterosexual repair industry, which is like the self-help and like seduction coaching and like pickup artist workshops and content and like dating advice for women. I think if people spent less time thinking about that and more time thinking about who they are and what they want, you wouldn't have so many questions about dating. You know, you would be able to tell on an intuitive level if this person and you, in whatever context, makes sense, is something that you want to further explore or not. You know, like you can feel any asymmetry in your interest with someone when you have interest in your own life and being able to take responsibility for it. You know what I mean? But that's people's life's work, you know, and at some stages of your life, being in a romantic relationship facilitates that. And at other times it doesn't. And that can be a really difficult thing for people to unlearn, because you're not given the opportunity or the permission to spend the time to ask yourself what it is you want or who you are whether you're in a relationship or not, because you're being baited this idea that you will only know who you are when someone else sees you or someone else gives you the permission to see you, you know? And that's just life. It's not going to be simple, and there's going to be times when you're embarrassed, whether you like it or not, but what you learn from it is what's most important, you know, and how you evolve from it is what's most important, I think. It's this cognitive dissonance that exists in the zeitgeist between what we're being told to value versus what we intuitively feel is right for us, you know, because we've been told and sold this idea of heterosexuality and partnership being the prize, or men being the prize, or women being the prize. And it's not really about whether there's anything good or bad about being in a relationship, but what your relationship to being in a relationship is. You know, do you think that being in a relationship is what you need to feel whole? Do you think it's what you need to give yourself permission to, you know, exist, or to believe that you're desirable, or believe that you're worthy, or believe that you're a man, or believe that you're a woman? Like, what is your relationship to whether you have this thing or not, you know? And that's kind of what I want my content to address in all different ways. It's not that consuming is good or bad, or that being in a relationship is good or bad, or that, you know, having a job is good or bad. It's what is your relationship to these things, and how is it productive or destructive? Does it help you to be hot and have fun or not? And how can you adjust your perspective and your approach to these parts of your life so that you can be hot and have fun? Because it's not like, I don't enjoy my job, it doesn't make me feel hot and have fun, so therefore I need to be unemployed. That's not what it is, okay? It's, okay, I don't enjoy my job. Do I not enjoy it because of the environment that I'm in, or because I feel like my job is part of my value and identity, and that I need to be making a certain amount of money in order to feel valid, or that I need to have a certain position in order to feel valid? Like, there's so many questions around your relationship to the thing itself, not whether the existence of the thing has value or not. That's the cognitive dissonance that we're experiencing. You know, we're being told being in a relationship is going to make me feel good, is going to be like the status marker, and then when you're actually in it, you don't feel that good, okay? Because you might be crying and throwing up every day over a guy that doesn't really care if you live or die. You know, he's just in it because he wants regular sex. You are in it because you thought that, you know, winning his approval and him like picking and choosing you is going to give you that cosign as a woman. But even if it gives you that on a surface level, you don't feel truly loved anyway. So what was the point of that? That feels embarrassing. That's when it gets embarrassing, right? So I want to talk about some other things, like how pop culture has kind of affected our relationship to how we perceive relationships. Because like back in the day, our exposure to other people's relationships is like, you see tabloids and people talk about public figures, and then you see people in your real life. Okay. And now there's this whole middle section that's like social media. And social media could be people that you know. It could be people that know people that you know. It could be an influencer. It could be a celebrity. It could be some random person like that's just sharing their experience of their relationship. So now there's so much more information and so many other data points that we can be comparing ourselves to, or that we can be that can influence how we see relationships and how we understand relationships. And I think there is a difference between people who use social media just for friends and family, and then influencers slash public figures slash celebrities. So there is like a whole subset of the entertainment industry that's built around romance, like the romantic industrial complex, from PR relationships to like sponsored relationship content, sponsored weddings, like all this stuff. There's a lot that goes into creating and furthering the culture of heterosexuality and making it profitable. It's really easy to sort of take that for granted, or to forget that when you're consuming so much information. You don't even think about how someone would be leveraging their relationship for publicity and for like material gain. But it's a very like real part of how the media works now. And I think in the article, it discusses how, you know, there are girls saying that they follow an influencer and they lose interest in them once they start posting about their boyfriend. or influencers that don't want to post about their partners because previously when they did, they lost followers. I think when women build a following around being single, they are kind of debunking this idea that being a single woman makes you a spinster, right? Because if you're an influencer, your life has to be sort of aspirational or relatable to people in order for you to accumulate a following. So if you've done that by thriving as a single girl and then you become partnered and then that becomes your brand, I think like it kind of speaks to this, like on a subconscious level, women like lose hope in their ability to thrive as single women, you know, if they are single at the time, potentially. I mean, for me personally, I have always been okay with being single from a young age. I never really pedestaled romance or being partnered as like a superior status to being single. I'm like, the only thing that matters to me is being hot and having fun. And I can do that whether I'm single or in a relationship. And I think being able to do it single is more important than being able to do it in a relationship, because the longest relationship you have in your life is with yourself. So whether I'm married to someone for 20 or 30 years or not, I've still got to be there before and after that relationship. So my relationship with myself is more important than the possible relationship I would have with a romantic partner in the future. Even though like you're told that being in a relationship is going to give you status and is like cool, or like this whole like, is your boyfriend, a boyfriend is like a Birkin now, your audience doesn't like it, or it doesn't actually make you appealing to an audience at the same time. But this is going to be different for like different sort of like echo chambers, I think. I don't think this is an overarching trend. I think this is just a direction that like the culture is moving in, but there's still like plenty of people that are still like doubling down and very much invested in like heteronormative, heterosexual culture. But you know, we're ahead of the curve here. So this idea of like hard launching your boyfriend or having your boyfriend be part of your public persona, I think an observation that I have is that a lot of people don't really intentionally separate their personal life with their online life now. And I think that for the sake of everyone's mental health, like that's something that we need to be doing. And also recognizing that how someone presents himself online could be very different to in person. Be aware of any like assumptions that you're making and detach from them, you know, like it's natural for your brain to sort of create stories and to fill in holes, but just become aware of that, because you never really know what's going on in other people's lives, because most people don't even know what's going on in their life, okay? Like based on all of the stuff that I've read and observed and the content that I've been creating, the first person that you lie to is yourself. So anybody that's out here trying to like do PR for their relationship or their life and say, my life is really great, so like give me money or care about what I'm saying, just always take that with a grain of salt, because you just never know, you know, like, and I'm include myself in this too, because there are times where I'm like, yeah, this is great, I'm loving it. And then something changes and I realize that I didn't love it. I just convinced myself to love it because I thought that for whatever reason, like this was going to make me happy or whatever. Like we all go through that. We're all human. So you need to have discernment in the people that you follow and to what degree you let them influence your own perception of relationships and your own perception of whether being in a relationship is right for you right now or not, or making your relationship part of your public identity is right for you right now or not. I think recognizing that your relationship, when you post it on the internet, it's really just other people's entertainment. You know, nobody is going to care or invest in your relationship more than you, or nobody can really. Like even if you are someone who has like K-pop standom level fans, no matter how much they care about your relationship, whether you share it directly or not, they're not going to be there to take responsibility for what happens when it goes well or when it goes badly. You know what I mean? Like that's still something between you and that person and you and yourself. And I think to make that part of your public identity without a little bit of discernment or without some kind of goal in mind is maybe naive. I think there are some people who just go all in their relationships and how it affects their public identity, which I actually think is great, you know, because you can tell that they're doing everything they can with the information that they have, and then when they get new information and it's no longer compatible with what they want for themselves, they leave that relationship and it's just part of their story. It's not their identity. You know, there's a very subtle difference, and I think that's the difference between what makes sharing your partner publicly embarrassing or not. It's like, is there this feeling that you're doing it wholeheartedly and it's part of your story? Or is there this feeling that you've given up some part of yourself in order to make this relationship work so that you can then share it and feel like it was worth everything that you sacrificed? Because that's never how it works. You don't get a prize for suffering, ever. And you can't put a relationship on your resume. So if you're going to make it part of your public persona, hopefully it facilitates you getting paid. Because otherwise, I really don't see the point. Like, your relationship would be much healthier if other people aren't involved in providing their opinion on something that's between you and another person, and on such an intimate level too. Because nobody else can take responsibility for your relationship, I think you need to ask yourself like what you're willing to put out there for public scrutiny, whether it's micro or macro, because it's just going to be entertainment to some people. So some final thoughts from me. I just think it's embarrassing to be sad in any capacity for longer than I need to be, because I think that my life satisfaction and my happiness is my responsibility. And like, being a baddie isn't the absence of bad things happening to you. It's your ability to overcome any challenges that you experience and then share what you've learned. Like, that's kind of like my philosophy towards life. And if I'm feeling like I'm being extracted from against my best interests in any situation, okay, friendship, work, family, romantic relationship, I know that I have to do something about it. And if I don't do anything about it and I just complain about it and people watch the life drain out of my body, I think that's embarrassing. So that's how I personally live my life. Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody comes to that realization at the same time. It's a journey, but that's kind of how I would think about things. The relationship being able to embarrass me or not is not really the issue at hand. It's, am I embarrassing myself? Everyone's journey is different, but each time you try to force yourself down a path that doesn't feel authentic to satisfy the illusion of what you think other people think is cool in a way that is ultimately detrimental to you, you will lose and you will feel embarrassed. Like, I would rather fail 1,000 times publicly and learn something about myself, learn more about myself, better understand myself, better connect to myself, better embody myself, than to fail 1,000 times in the pursuit of what I think other people think is cool, or in the pursuit of what I think other people will give me approval for. Because the opinion of the audience is always fickle, okay? So you should never do it for them. You should do it for yourself, and then the people that appreciate it will come. And that's something that you can do on the micro and the macro, like in terms of your romantic relationship and just your relationship with yourself and the world at large. So it's only embarrassing to have a boyfriend if you're doing it because you think it's going to make you cool. If you've sacrificed part of yourself to maintain a relationship that has taken you away from other things that on some level you care about more, but you've denied yourself the permission to care about because you think that this man's like approval is more important than your approval of yourself. And to see women, sacrifice their hobbies, their friendships, their relationship with their family, their education, their career for a relationship, that's sad, especially when you have the freedom to choose otherwise. That's the part that's embarrassing, and that's the part that anyone that like resonates with this article and like the themes of it fears, And not everybody wants to be hot and have fun. But if it's something that on some level you are inclined to adopt, well then come and join the party. Duh. A man might be part of it or they might not. And this is not gender specific either, because I think there's a lot of men that also struggle with the idea that they should have this or that in place until they can feel worthy of loving themselves, love from a woman, love from their family, love from society. But these are all things that we sort of have to question and challenge ourselves. Other people can't give us that permission. I can tell you that I love you and I think that you're worthy over and over again, but if you don't believe it yourself, you'll never internalize that. And that's the same for women. If you don't give yourself the full opportunity to live your life the way that you want to live, especially the older that you get and the more agency you have over your decision making, or the potential for agency over your decision making, if you don't take that opportunity, no one's going to give you a prize at the end of it. You're going to end up having to fail 1,000 times again, but in service of figuring out who you are. So you may as well just start there. Thanks for watching. let me know your thoughts and feelings. It was a bit all over the place. But yeah, it's not really a yes or no answer. I think the question is, I think the question and the exploration of it is much deeper. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Thanks for sticking through this video. Follow me on all the things, subscribe, comment, stay hot and having fun. Speak to you soon. Love you lots. Bye.